This is one of the wildest days yesterday, and I'm sure today will be wild too, that I've ever seen in my life as a sports fan. The decision to not play by the 6 NBA teams that were scheduled to play yesterday, as well as I think it ended up being 6 Major League Baseball teams, is one of the craziest and most insane and most illogical decisions that I have ever seen made by anyone in positions of prominence in the world of sports, maybe the craziest, okay? We're going to have a huge, wide open forum today for everybody out there listening. We will open up the phone lines. The First Amendment, as I like to say, is always alive and well on Outkick. In the third hour of the program, we are scheduled to be joined by Jason Whitlock, and we'll have a good discussion with him about this. We were out to dinner last night, Whitlock and I, and CEO of our company, and I'm not sure that in the 21st century there has been a more significant day in terms of news relating to sports that moves beyond sports into the larger stratosphere of discussion ever in the 21st century than what we saw yesterday. And here is a baseline analysis. First of all, we don't know exactly what's going to end up happening. There was a player meeting last night. There were reports that the Lakers and the Clippers had voted to leave the bubble and that they wanted nothing else to do with the season. I'm going to explain to you as we go on here why I don't really buy that storyline, but that is the latest so far as we have heard. Certainly, the way this story is going, we will update you during the course of this live broadcast if any other news comes out. But here is what I would say in general. The Milwaukee Bucks started all of this by refusing to take the court against the Orlando Magic for their early afternoon game 5 of their series in the playoffs. It then spiraled beyond that. Oklahoma City Thunder and Houston Rockets also refused to play. And then finally, the Lakers refused to play against the Portland Trail Blazers. I would be stunned if there are going to be any games at all today. So the first thing to think about here, and I'll put on my lawyer hat for some of this discussion as well, because I do think there are many interesting legal ramifications at play. The first thing to think about is, how do you want to classify what the players are doing? Some of them are calling it a boycott. Some people are calling it a strike. Some people are calling it a protest. Here is what I would say at its most basic level. It doesn't make any sense at all. It is an emotional response to an emotionally charged event, but there's no tangible action that can come from the NBA players. Let me explain, or the NBA teams. Let me explain what I mean by that. Most people who protest or boycott or strike are seeking an action from someone else over their decision not to do something. That's how most lockouts, strikes, boycotts, protests begin. Someone refuses to do something until something else is done. That is the very basic illustration of a lockout, a protest, a shutdown, a boycott, whatever you want to call it. That logic doesn't apply here at all, because the NBA players can't really get anything from the NBA owners that addresses why they are upset. The NBA owners and the NBA in general is not the justice system in the state of Wisconsin or in our nation. The justice system does not bend to the will of what the NBA players or owners want, nor should it. There is right now an investigation into a police shooting going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Yesterday evening, after the players refused to play, details were released by the Wisconsin Department of Justice, including significantly that the individual who was shot in this case, he had, according to the Department of Justice and according to this individual himself, a knife, and he refused to listen to police commands. And when he went into his car, the police officer who shot is going to say, and has said, he feared for his safety because they had already tased this man. They had already tried to subdue him. He was refusing to listen to officer commands, and he had a knife. And so that police officer felt compelled to open fire. That's going to be a really hard case. This is me putting my lawyer hat on. It's going to be a really hard case, even if charges are brought, to get any sort of conviction at all. The reports are, again, that this individual has admitted that he had a knife, that he wasn't listening to police commands, that he opened his car, and the police officer is going to say that as a result, he felt threatened by the behavior of this individual and opened fire. Now, you can argue that he shouldn't have fired that many times. You can argue that his use of force was excessive under the circumstances. All of those things are certainly debatable and ultimately may well end up being the decision of a DA and or a jury if charges are brought. But here's what is key. The NBA, their players, their organization, their owners, has absolutely nothing to do with the decision that is made about what charges might be appropriate in this case or if any charges at all will be brought. So the NBA players have initiated a protest without the ability to in any way force anyone to make a change that leads to the protest ending. In other words, if right now I decided that I was underpaid and I said I'm not going to work anymore until Fox Sports Radio pays me more, I could argue that and I could refuse to show up and do my job. Now, like the NBA players, I've got a contract and I wouldn't have much of an argument there. But at least if I didn't show up, you would understand that maybe I was mad at my bosses, and as a result, I was demanding some sort of action, and I wouldn't come back to work until they undertook that action. But here, this doesn't have that connection. The NBA players literally cannot make a demand of the NBA owners that leads to any action other than maybe the NBA owners give more money to social justice warrior causes. The NBA owners have done nothing here that would justify the way the players are behaving. In fact, this is pretty strong evidence. The NBA owners and the commissioner, they allowed players to put social justice warrior slogans on their jersey. They allowed players to kneel for the national anthem in contravention of their contractual obligations to stand for the national anthem. They also put political messages on the court itself. All of that was not enough for the players, but it just is further evidence that if you get woke, you can't go woke enough. And it's like the players, with a really unsophisticated lack of understanding of the world at large, thought that there were going to be no police shootings because they were taking a knee for the national anthem and because they had social justice warrior slogans on their jerseys and because they wrote Black Lives Matter on the court. And this, to me, is evidence that the players have a wildly outsized expectation about their own influence in the world at large and in the United States at large. Because those players thought that somehow they were changing the world or changing the United States by what they were doing, but really they were just preaching to a choir that already agreed with them. It's not like there were super racist people out there who thought, hey, you know what? I want to kill people based on their race. But then I saw NBA players were taking a knee for the national anthem, and I decided I shouldn't be racist anymore. That's ludicrous. The NBA has a tiny pinprick of an audience. Around 2 million people watch an NBA game every playoff game. There are 330 million people roughly in the United States. The NBA has a pinprick of the overall United States population as their audience. They have almost no impact on the decisions that are made in the United States by 328 million people on a day-to-day basis who aren't watching or consuming any of their content at all. So the NBA had the players, it seems to me, believed they had an outsized impact, and maybe that's social media convincing them, and the media that covers their league, and the fact that they're in their bubble, maybe it is all that group that has convinced them, that silo of basketball in the NBA, that they're more influential and impactful than they actually are. Larger context here. The NBA players and owners split revenue in this league roughly 50-50. If the NBA players don't come back and play, they are responsible for hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars in contractual losses for failing to fulfill their obligations as employees of the NBA. If they don't deliver a postseason, they are in massive breach of their contracts with ESPN and with TNT, which theoretically would say we are not paying any more money to the NBA over this situation because we're already losing billions of dollars. Okay? So they are effectively protesting their own business. And this is difficult for some people logically to understand. But how often do people protest businesses that they partially own? Because the NBA players get half of all the league revenue. They are partners with the owners. This would be like me protesting Outkick. I own Outkick. I get a substantial portion of the revenue. Very rarely do people protest their own business when they are in a revenue share agreement and effectively partial owners of that business. I don't understand that either. Finally, there is no way to end this protest, lockdown, shutdown, boycott, whatever you want to call it. There's no way to end it now. Now that we know this guy in Kenosha was armed with a knife, the chances that he's going to be charged with substantial wrongdoing, that is the police officer, are pretty low, I think. He may be charged with a crime, but it's not going to be one that is incredibly high level, I don't believe, because getting a conviction, given the fact that this individual was armed with a knife, had outstanding warrants, and refused to comply with police officer instructions, it's going to be super hard to get charges and or to get a conviction from a jury. So how do the NBA players end their work stoppage now? There's nothing that they can tangibly get that is going to make them look anything other than ridiculous. If they go back to work on Friday or Saturday or Sunday or Monday or whenever it is, they're going to have just changed the day that their games are played and not change the world of sports at all. In fact, they are going to have destroyed much of the goodwill that has been built up over decades for NBA basketball fans. Because there is nobody, in my opinion, out there who is not an NBA fan now that suddenly is going to become an NBA fan over the players refusing to play basketball. There's no out here where the players look like winners. There's no out here where the players look like they were able to actually gain something that matters. They can go to the owners and make the owners give more money to social justice warrior causes. And maybe some people who are idiots will be like, oh, this was a huge win for the NBA. But they are in danger right now of destroying the game of professional basketball for a huge majority of the audience out there. And I understand there's a bunch of people running around who are part of the blue checkmark brigade on Twitter that are uber woke, and they're like, oh, these players are so brave. When you actually break down what they did, they behaved emotionally and irrationally without any set goal in mind. A protest without a goal is a childlike idiocy, because all you're doing is lashing out emotionally without the ability to undertake any substantial positive impact. And I think the NBA players now have painted themselves into a corner because there's no way for them to substantially alter anything. The owners, the commissioner, they've already bent over backwards. They let them put names on their jerseys, social justice slogans. They let the literally political movement be written onto the basketball court. They allowed players to break their contracts and not stand for the national anthem. I don't know what more owners and or the commissioner can do at this point. They've already made unprecedented gestures of goodwill towards the players to allow them to embrace politics. And now the players have gone so woke that they are effectively destroying their own business. I'm going to open up phone lines. I'm going to bring in the crew. 877-996-6369. I will answer any questions that you guys might have. This is a mess. And by the way, I would say this as well. Whatever political beliefs the players might have, I think their actions are actually leading to the opposite of their political beliefs advancing. If you hate Donald Trump, and I think many of the players do, they're actually making it more likely that Donald Trump is going to get reelected with their actions. Because in Wisconsin, I think all of this insanity breaks in favor of Donald Trump. And I think there are a lot of sports fans out there that feel like the world has gone off the rails and that this hyper-political, hyper-partisanship actions are not in any way encouraging people to support a new president. I just think that this is ultimately an action without logical sense that is unsupportable by all of the facts. And that as a result, the players' own political perspectives are being undermined by a lack of logic and rational common sense based on their behaviors.